Well, welcome to the Heart of the Black Madonna YouTube channel with me, your host, Stephanie Georgia. Thank you so much for spending your valuable time with me as we delve into the many threads that make up the Black Madonna through art, history, culture, and spirituality. For this video, I am honoring, as an American, the American Hispanic Heritage Month. I'm sensitive to the fact that words, labels, and titles are sometimes problematic. So let's recognize the spirit of this month. From September 15th through October 15th, let us recognize the vibrant contributions of the American people whose heritage comes from Spain, Mexico, the Caribbean, Central, and South America. Hispanic Heritage Month originally started with 1 week of commemoration when it was first introduced by Congressman George E. Brown in June 1968. With the civil rights movement that was in full force at the time, the need to recognize the contributions of the Latin community gained traction in the 1960s. Awareness of the multicultural groups living in the United States was also gradually growing. Two heavily Latinx and Hispanic populated areas, the San Gabriel Valley and East Los Angeles in Southern California, which is where I'm from, spent most of my life there, were represented by Brown at the time, and he's on the left of your screen, and I just love this picture. He just looks like such a nice person. His aim was to recognize the integral roles of these communities in American history. Observation of Hispanic Heritage Week started in 1968 under President Lyndon B. Johnson and was later extended to a 30-day celebration by President Ronald Reagan, starting on September 15th and ending on October 15th of every year. It was enacted into law via approval of Public Law 100-402 on August 17th, 1988. If you're like me, it's like, well, why is September 15th through October 15th the Heritage Month? Usually, like with Black Heritage Month in the US, it's the month of February, and Women's History Month is the month of March. Why in the world would you go from September 15th to October 15th? Technically, it's a month, but it's kind of two. And the reason is September 15th is set at the starting date for the month because it's important for many reasons. It's the independence anniversary for Latin American countries of El Salvador, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, and Honduras. From here onwards, the independence days of Mexico and Chile fell on September 16th and September 18th, respectively. Dia de la Raza, or Columbus Day, also falls within this month on October 12th. And while Columbus was Italian, his voyage set off a series of events not exactly celebrated by Native Americans, but his initial voyage was sponsored by Ferdinand and Isabella of Castilla and Aragon, and is certainly a historic as well as important date in the history of the Americas. At the time of the recording of this video, which is September of 2022, I have just completed editing the Black Madonna Speaks podcast, a special guest interview with Carlos Nieto III, who is a native of Los Angeles, California. And this delightful human being exhibits all the qualities we celebrate during this month. He's an animator, teacher, and graphic novelist who's creating a graphic novel about a young woman in Los Angeles who, through tragedy, begins to explore her personal history and the origins of her culture. The graphic novel is called L.A. Calavera, which translated into English means skull. Now, personally, I find Mr. Nieto a delight and feel blessed as an American and a Southern Californian to have such a dynamic and creative person contributing to the collective fabric of our respective cultures. As an anthroposophist, what I find most interesting about Nieto's title for his graphic novel, L.A. Calaveras, is that the title symbolizes through the word calaveras another word called Golgotha, or the place of the skull where Jesus Christ was crucified. This is the place where the transformation of humanity began. One aspect of the mystery of Golgotha, as we anthroposophists like to call the event, is that by this action, humanity was given the capacity to think independently, given the capacity to think independently as individuals. I invite you, my viewers, to listen to the podcast when it airs on September 28th, 2022, as it is an excellent example of an artist creating out of independent thinking. I met Mr. Nieto when he was doing research for his graphic novel, as he was finding that the Black Madonna and the Virgin of Guadalupe were integral to understanding the history of Spain and the Americas. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with these images, the image to your right is the Black Madonna of Extremadura, Spain, and she is called the Virgin of Guadalupe. And the image on the right is the Virgin of Guadalupe in Mexico. So getting back to Mr. Nieto and my original connection was that he found my YouTube channel and he started reaching out to me and asking me questions about these images. And he certainly took it to a new level. So I am anticipating his graphic novel quite deeply. But for me, this is not only a delightful connection with him as a person and my awareness of his art, but it was a deep affirmation on the necessary contributions of art, specifically religious image, in reflecting the evolution of consciousness. Art, as we know, is also a method by which the gods speak to humanity. As you have heard me quote Austrian philosopher Rudolf Steiner many, many times. What the gods are saying to us about the history of the Hispanic people is quite profound and vast. To understand this, we must first explore the Iberian Peninsula, which is a body of land on the European continent. It's basically the southwestern aspect of the European continent, which is surrounded by the Mediterranean and Atlantic Oceans. It is also close in proximity to the Balkan and Italian peninsulas, as well as North Africa. Because of its location and immense coastline, the Iberian Peninsula has been influenced by many different cultures. It was, for all intents and purposes, the first melting pot, so to speak, of Western civilization. The peninsula has been inhabited for at least 1.2 million years by various generations of humans. All major periods from the Neolithic on forward have left evidence of their existence on this rugged landscape. The vast coastline meant that numerous explorations were conducted by peoples such as the Phoenicians, the Greeks, the Romans, and the Vikings. In terms of the Black Madonna, one of the most relevant groups of explorers to leave their mark on Iberia were the Carthaginians, who originated in what is now Tunisia. The first Roman troops arrived on the peninsula in 218 BC, and after 200 years of war with the local Celtic and Iberian tribes, annexed the territory and named it Hispania. Many subsequent Roman emperors came from families that originated from this region. The Romans remained mostly in charge for 600 years until the eventual collapse of the Western Roman Empire. But there were also Byzantine, which is another fancy name for the Eastern Roman Empire, influences in Hispania for much longer, especially on the many islands surrounding Iberia. During this 600-year period, the Latin language infused the dialects of the ancient peoples, and the beginnings of what we now understand as the Spanish language began. In the early 5th century, Germanic tribes began to occupy territory, and the beginnings of the Vandal and Visigothic kingdoms began to form. It's amusing to me how the word Vandal is being used as the origins of modern fantasy world people in the latest installment of the Mega Cable Network miniseries. But I digress. Starting in 711 AD, Muslim armies began to invade and conquer the Christian peninsula, eventually taking the lower 3/4 of territory, but not the northern coastal and mountain lands. During the next 800 years, different Christian kingdoms that made up Iberia would slowly retake their territory from the Muslims, with the final fall of Granada in 1492, instigated by the combined Castilian and Aragonese forces of the famous Ferdinand and Isabella. These two monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella, joined their respective kingdoms into a super kingdom through their marriage and filled with what I call, this is my label, uber Catholic zeal from their heady victories over the Muslim occupiers. And they took their desire for empire across the globe, so to speak, beginning with Columbus. This history is significant in terms of the Black Madonna. When people ask me my favorite cuisine, which I'm sure you're wondering why I would bring up food at this point in the video, but bear with me. When people ask me what is my favorite cuisine, my instantaneous response is Spanish. Why, do you ask, both in regards to Spanish history as well as Spanish food, have any relevance to the Black Madonna? The relevance is multiculturalism. As an American of mixed heritage, Slavic, Macedonian, German, and Welsh, I am multicultural, as well as coming from a nation that by definition is multicultural, even though there are quite a few demographics that are uncomfortable with this reality and are fighting it tooth and nail, even though they are also multicultural. For me, food, art, fashion, and even religious practices are at the heart of multiculturalism, especially in America. Spanish food, as well as culture, has many influences: African, European, and American, and a bit of Asian for good measure. Mole is an example of this. Mole, for those of you who do not know, is this delicious savory sauce from Mexican traditions that mixes almonds or peanuts, chocolate, cinnamon, clove, along with different sorts of pepper to meld into amazingness that goes with just about anything you want to slather it on. And all of the ingredients in this delicious sauce, the sauce of Mexico, show the melding of cultures, agricultures to be exact, from Africa, Asia, and the Americas. Well, this melding of cultures, melding of continents is the same with the Black Madonna. As you've heard me say many times, in Europe, the Black Madonnas were brought to the European continent by several migrations. First, from the monks evangelizing from the Holy Land as well as Africa. St. Helena of the Cross brought back several Black Madonnas from Palestine, which is considered to be a crossroads between Europe, Asia, and Africa. The geography of Israel is part of Asia Minor, which is also true for Constantinople, the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, which is now called Istanbul in modern Turkey. The main reason Constantine the Great established the new Rome, as locals called, on the Bosphorus, which was precisely the peninsula that joined the three known continents of the time, Asia, Africa, and Europe. Constantine wanted the capital there so that he could basically keep an eye on all of these continents, and it was very well placed. And it's interesting to me that many Black Madonnas came from Africa or Asia Minor up through Constantinople and then entered Europe from there. So that's an interesting reflection on this history. The majority of Black Madonnas in Europe are in Spain and France. And what you can see is a map of Black Madonnas from the Interfaith Mary page. And I highly recommend going to this page, but all the little red dots are Black Madonnas, and you can see they're quite concentrated in Spain and France. So the majority of Black Madonnas, as I said before, are in Europe, in Spain and France. Original ones from the first migration of North Africa monks were also in Spain. The Crusaders brought back many, and the ones transported to Europe in the hands of the Knights Templar were placed along the Camino de Santiago de Compostela. There's an interesting collection of Black Madonnas in the area of Guipuzcoa, region of northern Spain. And this is just south of the French Pyrenees border. And these Madonnas are aptly called the Seven Black Virgins. What is interesting about the placement of the Black Madonnas along the Camino by the Knights Templar, specifically along the northern Camino route, is that this region of land was bequeathed to the Templars by King Alfonso the Battler, who fought along the Templars to repel Muslim occupiers in Aragon and Navarre in the early 1100s. With the age of exploration, which some native peoples might relabel as the age of exploitations, the Spaniards, along with the Portuguese, who both occupied the Iberian Peninsula, went across the globe, claiming all sorts of territory from the Americas to the Pacific Islands, Africa, and Asia. In each place, they brought their traditions, animals, and plants with them. And of course, they brought their institutional religion, priests, and missionaries. We need to keep in mind the age of exploration, which can also be called the age of European discovery, conquest, or exploitation, depending on one's perspective, happened roughly between the middle of the 1400s through the 1600s. This was a time of great upheaval in Europe, particularly when it came to religion. The Reformation happened at this time with wars, counter-reformations, and all that goes along with such events. According to the Catholic perspective, nearly 9 million souls were lost to the Protestants, meaning people who converted to Protestantism. The Spanish monarchy was fresh out of enduring 700 years of Muslim occupation, which, while the Muslims were not sticklers for converts, actually, in many ways, they did not want converts because, according to Sharia law, Jews and Christians could continue to worship according to their traditions. All they had to do was pay a special tax to do so. Not converting the local populations to Islam meant a source of revenue for the local sultans. So there was a great toleration for other faiths because it was good for business, which is kind of alien to our understanding of Christian imperialism. The fervor of Islamic conversions actually happened after the fall of Granada, and Eastern Europe suffered for nearly 500 years under Ottoman Turkish occupation. But that's another very, very long story. The Black Madonnas of the Americas and the Pacific Islands usually arrived on ships from Iberia or Portugal. The narratives of these Madonnas is that they always communicate with the natives, reveal themselves to the natives, heal natives, and show love and respect to the natives. There is also a message of hope, endurance, and cooperation these Madonnas convey, which is in stark contrast with the European occupying forces. Throughout the Americas and Mexico, Black and Mestiza Madonnas inspire pilgrimages, festivals, arts, music, dance, and culture. They blend Native and European customs to contribute to the beautiful fabric of society, as do the people who claim their Hispanic culture. I hope wherever you are, that you are able to celebrate the positive contributions of the peoples of Spain, Mexico, Central and South America, and the Caribbean, who themselves are an amalgam of heritages, Native, African, Asian, and Iberian. These lovely people are models of what we all strive to be, members of a global community that embodies the divine. The Black Madonnas invite us to see divinity in everything, regardless of externals. I hope you are safe, well, and feeling connected to the wider beloved communities. If your heritage comes from what we call Hispanic American, thank you for the many contributions you make to the fabric of our shared culture. I wish you many blessings on your journey, the journey of the human heart. This is Stephanie Georgia saying once again, thank you for sharing your valuable time with me.